Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to Gang of Two. At least at the moment, it's two. Lane is in battle with his internet at this moment. Hopefully, Lane wins. If he does, he will join us. If not, it's me and Pete. How you doing, Pete?
So far, so good.
Excellent. Things may take a downturn as soon as I start hosting here, but if you are in the chat room, please join us on the show. I've brought a couple of questions with me, per usual, just like the OBR weekly days. But we really want to hear from you. We really want to talk about what you want to talk about on the show tonight. So we will get into it. Hopefully, Lane will join us. If he doesn't, me and Pete will keep you company here for the next hour or so. So, Pete, lots going on today in the news with Cleveland Browns. Maybe more is going to happen tomorrow. We have a rumor out there from Adam Schefter that the Browns are quote-unquote buyers during this period of time, looking for young, controlled talent. If you were the GM of the Cleveland Browns, Pete, what would you be doing?
Yeah, I mean, Adam Schefter is echoing something that we've reported a little while ago in terms of what they're trying to do. Look, the Browns would like to get, as much as there are a lot of people who want to sell off pieces, and the Browns will listen, and if they get a good enough offer, they'll move off a guy. I mean, Amari Cooper is a good example. Last year was a really smart trade. But in general, the Browns are not going to get better by getting rid of guys. They're going to look to add pieces. So you mentioned it. Young doesn't necessarily need to be 22 or something, but with career in front of them, contract out beyond this year, Tyson Campbell and KT Leviston are right in that wheelhouse. I think that's the type of guy you're looking to get. Now, as we all sit here, we are all sitting there desperately hoping that that's going to come on the offensive side of the ball, and specifically offensive line and wide receiver or some other weapon. That it's tricky to sort of go out and point and say this guy fits the bill, because if that was the case, we all would have sit here. Of course, they're going to go after Tyson Campbell and KT Leviston. It's a little trickier than that. But if you're trying to sort of get an idea of what teams or whatever to sort of look for, it's probably teams that have made changes at coach or front office or something like that, and you're getting a similar situation as Tyson Campbell was, where the team decided he didn't fit what they were doing anymore, so we're going to move him, try to get something and take the eat the money that they owe him now to try to get out in front, because they've got a bunch of contracts they want to work out. So great for the Browns. They get to take advantage of that situation. Tyson Campbell has been great for them, and maybe the Jaguars are happy with their end of the deal, but ultimately they got rid of a piece they don't really care about anymore. So those are the type of deals we're trying to see if the Browns can pull the trigger on. My only caution, and why I'm always sort of wired to think that nothing's going to happen, is one, those deals are difficult to sort of pick out, and two, if it's a player that everybody's talking about, then the Browns are probably not going to push all their chips in the middle and make a huge offer that another team would likely make a bigger offer for. Because if they're a team that thinks they are in a playoff chase and a chance to win the championship, then they're probably going to pay more than the Browns would. So, right. Obviously I don't think the Browns were interested in Jalen Phillips, but as a good example, the Philadelphia Eagles think they're in a really good chance to compete this year. So they were willing to give up a 3rd-round pick for Jalen Phillips, who has had a rash of injuries in his career. He's a talented pass rusher, but with some risk. I think he's on the last year of his contract there. So it's not unlike the deal that the Bills made for Amari Cooper, different in the sense that Jalen Phillips is still a young player, still a very talented player, where the Bills are trying to squeeze the last hope and talent out of Amari Cooper. But, we'll see if they get something done on that front. I'm not terribly optimistic, but listen, I didn't see either of the other deals coming, and those have been pretty good for the Browns. So we'll see if they can find something along those lines.
Yeah. They're certainly looking toward 2026, 2027 it appears from the way that they're managing things at this point in time. One guy we need to talk about is David Njoku, who does not fit any of the parameters that you just mentioned in terms of trading for offense. If you're getting rid of him, you're getting rid of one of the two guys who has been able to hold on to the ball on a consistent basis. But he is 29. If you're the Cleveland Browns and somebody comes and offers you maybe a day two, fourth round draft pick for David Njoku, do you make the sacrifice that you have to make this season in order to acquire that other draft pick? Or do you think the Browns have tons of draft picks as it is that they're going to have trouble finding room for next year?
So there's a couple of elements to this. One, the Browns would have to give it a sweet enough offer to move off a player they could easily re-sign and would like to keep. Two, to your point, they're currently slated to have 10 draft picks. So yes, they could theoretically add an 11th draft pick, but they'd probably rather just improve the status of one of the 10 they already have, which sort of fits into Barry's wheelhouse of trade a pick swap where they improve the quality of one pick by offering another pick. So let's say, the David Njoku and one of those 6th or 7th round picks for a third. You would sit there and go, okay, I'm at least interested. And on one hand, there's a world in which this works out really well for the Browns. Say, for example, the team that's always thrown out there is the Denver Broncos.
Right.
Say the Denver Broncos want to do that deal, and the Browns say, listen, David, we're coming to you. We're saying, are you interested in this in this arrangement? You could finish out this season with the Denver Broncos, and we could just say, we're going to go ahead and sign you as soon as you hit free agency, unless the Denver Broncos are going to try to hit you with a franchise tag or something, which seems really unlikely, and just sign him back and essentially rent him out for a year for draft assets. The other possibility is David Njoku might be perfectly content to continue his career elsewhere, which the Browns would probably have a good idea about now and may incentivize him to move. But if the deal is not very good and they think that David Njoku is still going to get a big payday in free agency, which he very well might, then they may be content to get the compensatory pick or the compensatory value they'd get in that deal. But in general, I don't know that the Browns are going to get a big enough offer to want to move off David Njoku. The theory of the case is that, Harold Fannin plays tight end. So, of course, you can move David Njoku, despite the fact they play very different positions, even though they're both categorized as tight end. David Njoku is a very effective inline player. He's also a very good straight line player, very linear, straight line speed and those type of things. Harold Fannin is not inline. He's way better out in space. They use him at fullback. They'll flex him out. They'll use him as a wing, all those type of things, which is great. He's also much twitchier. He can do the little movements, cuts and change of direction stuff that's really good. Combined, those two go really well together. And if the Browns were to trade David Njoku, they would then create a hole they now have to fill because Kevin Stefanski or whoever is coaching here next year is going to want to find somebody who can play inline because that's just a very necessary position in the league. So if we're trying to get better or try to even add resources, does it necessarily help you to trade a player then you then have to go out and replace somehow? So That's where you sort of get into this whole thing of it's always very easy. And let's use Jalen Waddle and Garrett Wilson and all these other guys as example. It's very easy for 31 other teams to say that they should trade those guys because my team will get better if they trade them. But it doesn't help the team that's actually trading them right now. Is there Wilson and Waddle in particular are young players that they could, even as bad as those teams might be right now, that they could build around for the future, and then they have to go out and replace them. It's the same thing with, people who want to trade Myles Garrett. Okay, you can get all these things you want and get deferred draft assets, but then you have to also find a premium pass rusher. So you're creating another problem by making these deals.
Yeah. Another example of a deal is Wyatt Teller. Again, an offensive player, probably not what we should be dealing away. Would you put him in that category, or do you think he's probably gone at the end of the season anyway?
I wouldn't trade him because the Browns are bad enough on the offensive line. They certainly can't afford to get potentially worse. Plus, there's an element, and we've seen the Browns do this, where they're willing to ask these guys. And Wyatt Teller said flat out he wants to finish his career with the Cleveland Browns. So if they're asking him, he's probably going to say no. You'd have to get a great offer in that scenario. And I don't see a world where somebody's going to come in and go, man, we're really excited about giving you huge trade compensation for Wyatt Teller at this point.
Right.
So I get why these deals make sense in theory, but I don't think they make sense in practice. And the Browns, if for nothing else, have done try to do right by players as often as they can. Today is a great example. The Browns and DeMonte Casey came to an agreement to void a $200,000 roster bonus or whatever kind of bonus he has, so he can be released because he wants to go see if he can go sign with another team elsewhere. The Browns accommodated on that. They could have held him hostage and said, no, we're going to keep you here as long as possible. They did right by the player, just like they did right by Joe Flacco. They did right by Odell Beckham and a number of other players that may not have even deserved it, but the Browns try to do that because it's beneficial for them to improve their reputation and have good working relationships with agents,
right,
and players moving forward. And that stuff does translate. People do, I know there's any number of people who don't like Andrew Berry, but he does enjoy a pretty strong reputation when it comes to the people he has to work with.
Yeah. One would think that we got a couple of comments already. Heather says, Barry has a wheelhouse. It's trading. His drafts are sketch except for this year, but he makes some good trades. Don't mention Watson. Okay, we try not to on this show. But she's got a good point there. The Browns need help with wide receiver. That's one area where Andrew Berry has shown himself to be relatively successful in terms of getting good return on trades and not very successful in the draft. And I suspect that Carnell Tate may be gone before the Browns' second pick. So would you consider dealing away some assets for some help at wide receiver as long as that person is under contract for next year?
All depends on price, but the answer is probably not. There are multiple receivers I love, and at least some of them don't play for Ohio State. I know that's going to be a problem for you, but like this draft is going to be good. As long as, my biggest concern for the rest of the college season is just that these guys don't get seriously injured. Jordan Tyson from Arizona State is tremendous. Mekhi Lemon from USC is very good. And you mentioned Carnell Tate, who's certainly helping himself. I'd be thrilled to take any one of those three guys. And we'll see. I certainly hate the Raiders with the passion of 1,000 suns, given their performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars as the game was right there for them. But, there's a possibility that the Browns are going to be shut out. I don't know that that's likely right now. Of those three guys, there are other guys, people like Denzel Boston from Washington, whatever. But the Barry's trades, when it's come to wide receiver, have been in the offseason, and they've usually involved contract issues. Amari Cooper, Jerry Jones just didn't feel like paying him anymore, so they gave him away for nothing, basically. The Denver Broncos gave away Jerry Jeudy basically for nothing after they demanded a second-round pick the year before, and he just sort of waited them out and got a good deal. So timing is everything. This is probably not great timing on that, though. I'd love to be surprised and decide that Champ Kelly, who's the interim GM of the Miami Dolphins, feels like giving away Jalen Waddle for, pennies on the dollar. I'd be okay with that, but I just don't think it's very likely.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very likely at all. One of the things that happened today, a guy that I advocated drafting a couple of years ago, and a guy I think that you're fond of as well, Michael Hall, put out a very brief tweet with trade ? On it, and he deleted it right away. So we have no idea what that means. It could mean that he heard that one of his compadres was getting traded or whatever. Who knows? But Chris wants to know if Hall demanded a trade. That is more Lane Atkins territory. But would he fit your model at this point, Pete, of someone who the Browns could deal away because of the rise of Collins or, with his youth, one would think that he would be a relatively priced commodity by Andrew Berry?
Yeah, I think that should be a case where the Browns would be getting really good return on investment in terms of the trade. And what might allow them to make this move would be the emergence of Aiden Huntington, who's been great and was found as an undrafted free agent. Malik Collins is under contract for this year and next. Shelby Harris is sort of the one where you sit there and go, well, I don't know how long he's going to keep doing this. He's 34 years old, still a very professional, quality defensive tackle, but it's one of those things where you just don't know how long this is going to go. So if there's an opportunity, and here's again, I wouldn't think it's for draft capital. If it's a young player like Hall, I would think it'd be a player for player type deal where if somebody's willing to offer something that fits, it makes sense to improve the offense by saying, hey, we're going to use our strength on defense to try to improve the situation, the offense, and we find a good deal. That's great. And, there's all this talk that Jerry Jones has made a trade with somebody. And I would love to trade with the Dallas Cowboys because the Dallas Cowboys, one, draft very well, and they trade very poorly. They tend to overpay for things they want and don't often get great value on it. They're willing to move assets that they otherwise shouldn't. The wide receiver they traded for out of Carolina, I think they gave a fourth-round pick for, doesn't play. Those type of deals are great for them. I mean, the Micah Parsons deal was an outright disaster for them thus far. He's currently the reigning defensive player this last month, and their defense is terrible. So if you're sitting there looking at Jerry Jones, who may feel like he has some egg on his face and may feel compelled to overpay for an asset you have to try to get back in the mix, then I'm certainly interested to hear what they have to say. But again, it comes down to price and making sense. I don't feel like this. I don't imagine the Browns are trying to give away somebody they just drafted in the second round not long ago. Granted, he had one major knee injury that involved 2 surgeries. That certainly could change the dynamic, but we'll see what happens. I don't assume that he just randomly tweeted something because he just doesn't tweet very much. So maybe that's the move that's coming, but maybe there's something else coming. But yeah, he makes sense from the standpoint of the Browns have been for the 8 games he missed, or 7 games or whatever it was, the Browns were very good at defensive tackle. So he, just by circumstances, have allowed him to not necessarily become, an extra player, superfluous for that group. But it does allow them to sort of sit there and go, hey, we're doing pretty good with him. We're at least willing to listen to what other teams have to offer.
Yeah, he just doesn't seem to fit, Barry's modus operandi, dealing away someone that young. Shelby Harris makes a ton of sense, right? Dealing away a guy who's probably at the end of his career, would like to chase the playoffs, undoubtedly, and continue to get young at that position. But we'll have to wait and see. We don't have anything definitive on whether a deal was made or discussed or whatever. Lane in ATI and Rumor Central has been talking about who the Browns have been talking to, not about, there's not information out there anywhere on specific deals that are being discussed. Another area of the defense that, the Browns are sort of blessed with the potential to deal away a useful asset would be a defensive end, where Isaiah McGuire appears to be sort of secondary to Alex Wright at this point. Again, recent, 4th round draft pick, very young. One would expect in the case like Michael Hall's as well that you would have to get top dollar to get an Isaiah McGuire away from the Browns. Do you agree, Pete?
Yeah, and with the case of Isaiah McGuire, I think he's outplayed his draft status. I mean, you want him to be a better pass rusher, right? You want Alex Wright to be a better pass rusher. Neither one has really clicked in that area, but they're both excellent run defenders. They both made plays for this team. I think they're basically 1A and 1B realistically, opposite Myles Garrett. So it's another situation where if you're sitting there going, we feel really good about Alex Wright, and we want to see what he can become by the end of the season, potentially keep him around long term. And somebody's willing to give you potentially a profit for Isaiah McGuire. Again, you can use the strength you have on the defensive line to then bolster the offense. Beyond that, Cam Thomas has done a really good job as a guy they sort of brought in as a waiver claim last year. He's somebody I'd like this team to re-sign as a depth edge rusher. Here again, though, if they were to make that move, and even if they don't, I don't have a lot of reason to believe that Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is going to be back next year. So they're probably going to have to try to find more edge help. So if they were to deal in Isaiah McGuire, they will eventually have to replace that player, whether it's through the draft or free agency or something else. So, the phone is there. If people want to call and make a good offer, I'm certainly going to listen. I understand why teams would call, particularly at that position, given the way the Browns are sort of set up, that you could find a nice player there. But again, I'm not trying, if it's me, I'm not trying to give away good players. I think both those guys are pretty good players. They're just not guys that you're necessarily going to commit $80 million extensions to.
All right. Well, let's get to some of the chat questions and see what we got here. Lonzy Kellen from Facebook says, get rid of everyone and start over. I don't think that's an option, Lonzy. Comment from Manimal 1955 says, I am hoping the Browns don't have to trade up for a QB without having to tank. I hope the QB class is deep this year. I saw something, Pete, where Ty Simpson was the number one, betting odds, considered to be the top pick in the draft. No one saw that coming. Fernando Mendoza available. The draft class does not seem to have a gimme quarterback at number one where it's obvious. And so if the Browns finish in like 7th or 8th draft position, they can probably get someone. Do you think there's anyone out of that group that you've been watching who just jumps off the TV and you have to have them?
I think, well, I'm not willing to go anywhere near that yet. I will say I really like Fernando Mendoza. I think he's very impressive. I think Ty Simpson is a very good quarterback. From what I've seen, very interested in him. I would remind people that betting odds are designed to do one thing: get people to bet. Nevertheless, for a guy who's basically a one-year starter, he's been extraordinary. He went through that stretch of 4 ranked opponents in a row, playing at a really high level. They were idle this week. They're going to come out of this and finish out the rest of the year with a really good shot to make the playoffs. Indiana's got a really good shot to make the playoff. So these guys are going to be playing for, like Ohio State's got 4 more games and then potentially, another 3 games after that. So
right,
you could be looking at 7 more football games for some of these guys. That's a lot of football to be played and see where these guys end up. So much is going to depend on who comes out this year. Ty Simpson's intriguing because on one hand, two of his closest friends on the team are going to be back next year. One of them is Ryan Williams. On the other hand, he's about to be 23. There is another young, talented quarterback behind him who, Alabama may be sort of encouraged to get on the field, and they may sort of say, go ahead and declare for the draft. That's a dynamic that you're always sort of looking to play with and see where that goes. But no, Mendoza, Simpson, those guys are guys that I look at as being very good. I'm still of the belief that Dante Moore is going to end up going back to Oregon for another season as a redshirt sophomore. Maybe things will change if they go on a run and win the national championship, but I still think he's going to want to stay 1 more year. And then as you go down, it's going to be interesting. Are one of these guys going to get hot? John Mateer with his hand was playing, at a Heisman level, seemingly at one point, broke the hand, had surgery, hasn't been as good, but he could easily start playing really well and finish out the season really strong. There's a lot of guys in that category that could play well, get hot at the right time. And I would remind people, because there are people who are popping off saying the Browns should have drafted somebody like Jackson Dart at 5. Most people hadn't even considered the possibility of Jackson Dart until December or January, if that.
Right.
That's how long the college season is now, that these guys can get hot, get it going, and teams can sort of fall in love with some of these guys. And it's not like Jackson Dart was playing at Northwest Missouri State or something like that. He was playing at Ole Miss. He's playing at a major school in the SEC, So these guys can pop out right out of plain view and become some of the biggest players in the draft. not obviously not quarterback, but Armand Membu out of Missouri wasn't somebody who was talked about as a huge deal until basically February or March, despite the fact he played offensive tackle in the SEC at Missouri and ended up going 6th overall. So some of this stuff is yet to play out. A lot of football left, but if all these guys come out, or I should say the guys that I most likely to come out, Mendoza and Ty Simpson, are both out, I feel really good about the Browns' chances. I know it. I don't love Simpson's lack of experience, but he's really impressive from what I've seen on tape.
Right. Let's see here. I want to change the subject a little bit, and let's go to a question from Dan McKinnon to kick us off. He asks, how short is the leash on Gabriel? We have actually a quote from inside the organization on the Rumor Central forum. If you're not a subscriber, you can hit up the QR code that's above my head here and go to our subscription page and read what we heard from inside the organization. But it doesn't seem like there's a ticking clock on Gabriel. At least it's not very loud quite yet. If you were running the Browns, how long do you give this guy to show improvement on the field, Pete?
So I've sort of looked at this and said, 2 more games, which is you're coming out of the bye week, you get the Jets, and 1 more game, I think is the Ravens after that, to sort of get something going before I'm now looking to try to get Shedeur Sanders as ready as possible, because I don't know where he's at in terms of his readiness. What I do know is that he didn't practice today, as he's still seemingly dealing with the back injury. So Gabriel's leash gets longer if Shedeur can't play, unless they're comfortable switching to Bailey Zappi, and it doesn't seem like there's any real benefit necessarily to making that switch. They might as well, I get it from a standpoint, if they think Bailey Zappi can help them win a football game, I totally get it from that standpoint. But if the goal right now is to say we got to find out as much as we can about these rookie quarterbacks, then if you're not going to get to go to Shedeur, you might as well stick with Gabriel. But to me, 2 more games with the bye week, I want to see some growth. More than anything, I just want to see Dillon Gabriel fight like he has to prove himself and win a job. I was incredibly disappointed with what I saw from him against the New England Patriots because I didn't see fight from him. And it made it very easy for any onlooker to sort of go, give me anyone else. I want to see what they do compared to this. But when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, I don't know how far along he is. But if Dillon Gabriel's not sort of better in 2 games, I'm now looking to see how quickly I can get Shedeur ready to go, because you got to get something going. They can't just let the offense continue to languish out there the way it has under Dillon Gabriel's guidance thus far.
Right. And, if you let Gabriel play 2 more games, and that gives him 6 that he started, Shedeur can hopefully play the other 7. That seems fair to me. But, obviously the Cleveland Browns look at things a little bit differently and view Gabriel as being more ready. What do you make, Pete, of Joe Flacco? I know we talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago when we first traded him, but he threw for something like 470 yards the other night, and it just seems like, I don't know, it's just proof that it can't all be the quarterback, obviously, because Flacco was throttled when he was in Cleveland, and you've got Gabriel throttled now that he's in Cleveland. The question is, what's the problem, or is it a conflux of several different problems, including potentially play calling?
Well, it is several different problems. And I'll say first and foremost, I'm happy for Joe Flacco. Great. He gets to go play and do what he wants. This is all he wanted, was to get to play. He gets to do that. He's doing great with the Bengals. More power to him. And he got to beat the Steelers. So I'm happy with all of that. And the Browns got something for him. And he wasn't going to fit in the Browns' plans at this point. So I don't buy into the notion that the Browns should have kept him hostage rather than dealing him to somebody else. The Bengals are not of interest to me, so it doesn't sit here. I don't sit here and thinking about, oh my God, the Bengals are throwing for a bunch of yards. it doesn't matter as far as the Browns are concerned, at least not to me.
Right.
I get it's a very easy talking point for radio stations to go, oh, Joe Flacco is playing great with real receivers and all this other stuff. Irrelevant to me. It was a good deal for the Browns. Take it, move on. But to your point, like when Joe Flacco was in there, the offensive line was at its worst point. They dealt with DeJuan Jones, instantly injured. They got Jack Conklin was instantly dealing with the elbow. So when Joe Flacco was in there, you were at your most in flux on the offensive line. You were also, particularly with these young rookie receivers, at their rawest. Now, Joe Flacco, for his part, was also holding on to the ball too long, not trusting his receivers, and he was late on some passes, and there was just something wasn't clicking in terms of trust and throwing the ball the way he did the last time he was here, where he implicitly trusted Amari Cooper and even Elijah Moore, in addition to David Njoku, and the offense clicked immediately, not unlike it's going on with the Cincinnati Bengals. Talent, they had guys that knew what they were doing, and it worked, even though the offensive line was terrible then too, and they couldn't run the ball. Here, change that. The Jerry Jeudy situation is obviously a major source of frustration, given that he's coming off a season in which he had 1,300 yards receiving. You would have liked to have believed that could have started right where it left off, and at least carried this offense, but that didn't work. David Njoku hadn't clicked the same way it was working. So ultimately you make the decision, at the time I argued I would have kept Joe Flacco in there for 2 more games, but they went the direction they did. I think the argument that the within the building was, one, we've seen enough from Dillon Gabriel that we feel like he can get the offense moving in a way, or at least allow it to do what it's supposed to do for the most part. Clearly they were not accurate. They were not right on that to this point. And 2, if we're going to have all these rookies and young players and guys trying to figure it out, let's just have all of them be young players who are trying to figure it out and see if they can't grow together and see if that doesn't work. And we've seen some growth from the rookie wide receivers, but you see some rapid inconsistency. Isaiah Bond is, Sam Penix has written multiple articles exploring just the number of ways Isaiah Bond has been open for big plays, and they haven't been able to connect. And then at times he will drive you nuts because he does things that, like stopping on a route or not sort of showing awareness on where he should be in a certain situation, and it ends up hurting the Browns. But if it's him, if it's Malachi Corley, if it's Jamari Thrash, who I personally would like to see more of, because you get little bits and tastes of what he can do, and they taste pretty good so far. So I'd like to see more of that. And then the other thing that really hurt Joe Flacco, which I think is sort of an underrated element, is and seems like he's going to be ready to go, is losing Cedric Tillman. Cedric Tillman has developed enough to at least be a professional wide receiver, and losing him, I think, really hurt the offense with the hamstring injury. So all of those things, you are now hoping, and I think at this point praying, that something is going to, with the time off, being able to sort of get in the lab and just working, something's going to shake loose and get it going. And it has to fast. Like, that's why I'm saying 2 games, because if not, then you sort of have to move on and see what else you've got. But the Joe Flacco thing, daunting in the sense that it didn't work at all like the way they hoped, that they weren't able to recapture the magic. Annoying in the sense that the Browns still could have won, between him and Dillon Gabriel, could have won 2 more football games than they have so far. And you sit here and now you're 2-6 as a result.
Yeah. Very close to 4-4, and the discussion would be very different than the discussion we're having right now. Uncle John asks, how can he not be ready to go? I think that is about Shedeur Sanders, and it's due to a back issue. He just came in with a back issue, and there, stiffness in his back, and they're waiting for it to go away. The other reason he could not be ready to go is because he hasn't had a lot of reps with the first team, right? Pete, how big a factor is that? Do you want your first quarterback to have at least a week, right, throwing to his top receivers, trying to get in a little bit of rhythm or whatever, or is it not that big a deal?
Well, I mean, in terms of when they had Joe Flacco, it was easier to sort of say, hey, we're going to get some reps with the backup. In that case, it was Dillon Gabriel at that point. Well, once you made the move to Dillon Gabriel, now you're dealing with a rookie, and you need him to get every rep possible to try to get him up to speed and confident in everything else. I don't have any problem with that. Certainly, when the Browns decide to make that switch, then Shedeur's got to get all those reps in the same way Dillon Gabriel was. And Dillon Gabriel would then get basically nothing for the same reason. But in terms of why isn't Shedeur Sanders ready to go, you saw it in the preseason. He was unable to protect himself, particularly in the last preseason game. He was his own worst enemy in that game, and he got himself absolutely mauled over and over again to the point where I think Kevin Stefanski benched him to protect him from himself because I think he was going to get himself killed. And for the people who, you can find any number of people who have broken this down in depth on YouTube, and will show you every angle. The blocking was there, the receivers open, he just couldn't operate. And for the people who say, yes, but what about the first preseason game? And the first preseason game is better. He makes plays in that game, and there's some really impressive plays in that game. But the same issues are there. And, it reminds me of Justin Fields' last game in Europe, where he kept over-dropping in the pocket, and he was setting up pass rushers to absolutely murder him because offensive linemen don't have eyes in the back of their head. They don't know the quarterbacks could be, and they are expecting you to be at a certain point. And when you're not there, it allows you to put yourself in a bad situation. And Sanders did that consistently. Sanders has to get a better sense of the pocket. He has to get a better sense of not trying to run backwards. If you think to that first preseason game, 4th down and like 1 or whatever it was, he literally turned around and ran the other direction, or he ran out of bounds behind the line of scrimmage when he could just throw it away and not lose yardage. Like, those are things that you have to be able to fix and not be able to do to be trusted. So I understand the appeal. I think Shedeur Sanders, his ability to throw the ball is unbelievable. His touch, his accuracy, those types of things are great. But if he doesn't fix the other stuff, that's not going to count for much. He's going to be out of the league in 2 years. In the same way that if he does fix it, if he does address those issues, and if he has been working hard to improve his areas of weakness, I think he can be a long-term starter in a couple of years. I'm not at practice. The Browns aren't calling me and going, this is how he did today. But that is sort of the challenge he has to sort of address. So the fact that he's unable to practice certainly hurts him. He can watch tape and these other elements, but it's different when coaches can't see you do it on the practice field in those situations. So I'm hoping for his sake. Look, I think he's gotten hurt now twice because he's working so hard that he's actually overtraining in some of this stuff for the amount of time he's putting in, which on one hand, credit to him for trying to put in that work, but he's also taking himself out by now working himself potentially to injury. So these are the issues they're sort of dealing with. The thing that people have to understand, if the Browns believed, or the Browns even thought they had a good quarterback sitting on their roster, they would play them because it would solve every issue this team has in a heartbeat. And all of a sudden, everybody would feel good about this team. So these are the things you sort of have to bear in mind. I hope like hell that when Shedeur Sanders gets on the field, he can produce the magic that everybody wants. It will be a credit to the process the Browns went through and the work he was willing to do. But I'm not holding my breath that that's going to happen like that. I think it's really difficult to be a rookie quarterback in the NFL and hit the ground running. And, Jackson Dart, who I mentioned earlier, has started 6 games. 4 of them, he's thrown for under 200 yards. I like Jackson Dart. He was my second quarterback. I thought he could be a really good pro. I also thought he should sit the whole year. And I think you're seeing that right now because it's so difficult.
Right. Sanders obviously not available to the media to watch during practice. We get to see some stretching and some individual drills, just the beginning of it. And then they're ushered off the field. So we have to take the Browns' word that he is making progress in practice. And, from everything we've heard, those reports are not inaccurate. But we won't find out for a couple of weeks at least what he's capable of and what he has learned with the Cleveland Browns since coming here from Colorado. All right. Another big subject we need to talk about tonight, Pete, is play calling. Kevin Stefanski, for the second year in a row, has given up play calling. Year 1, it was Ken Dorsey. This year it is Tommy Rees, his offensive coordinator. we had a question in ATI and Ask the Insiders from DGriff1313. He asked, I was wondering if you guys think it will change much to have Reese calling the plays. I guess my feeling is it can't hurt, but if the players don't improve, probably won't change very much. Do you concur with that, Pete? Have you ever seen a play caller come in and just bang make a difference to a franchise?
It could do something. I'm not gonna say it's impossible. The problem is, like, I don't think people understand what the play calling dynamic ends up actually being. Both of these guys are heavily involved with the game plan. Both of these guys are working on the script. So all that stuff's going to stay the same, except that Tommy Rees is going to be the one making the calls as opposed to Kevin Stefanski. The potential value in Tommy Rees or Kevin Stefanski, who's done this really well in the past, is the notes he gives the quarterback before the headset before the earpiece goes off in the quarterback's head. He may give them little notes like just situation stuff. That stuff can be really helpful. It also changes the dynamic of what is going to happen on Sunday, which we won't really see, but nevertheless does change. And that it frees up Kevin Stefanski to sort of do other things potentially. He can be a little bit more present with the rest of the process in terms of just managing the game and all that stuff, or whatever else he wants to do, coach up specific players or whatever. But it's not like Kevin Stefanski's going to be sitting there idly by and letting Tommy Rees just call plays. He's going to have input. He's going to tell him what he thinks, and he may give him plays he needs to call. I mean, that happens. But every play caller has a little different feel and different things they really like and different things they like to go to, and maybe that flow provides a benefit. I think more that, like, I don't expect a huge difference, but what I would say for Kevin Stefanski's sake is there are people who think he's got this big ego. He will do anything as long as he thinks it's going to help this team win. If he's doing this just like he did last year to help this team win, and maybe Tommy Rees has experience as a play caller. He's called plays for Notre Dame. He's called play for Alabama. This is not like they're putting a guy in who's never done this before and seeing what's going to happen. He's a young coach with a huge future in front of him. So it just may be a natural progression for them. I hope it's able to produce something. But as I say this, every week we talk about how there are plays left on the field all over the place, the plays that could be made that aren't and all that stuff. So maybe there's something Tommy Rees can do to sort of help with that situation, and maybe they connect on more of those plays. But I don't expect this to be some massive change. And, I understand why people focus on this as a big deal. Mm-hmm. To me, it's not. And it's really funny when I hear media ask players about it, because unless you're the guy who's talking, unless you're the quarterback who's hearing the calls in the headset, you have no idea who's making these play calls or who's suggesting them or anything else. You just go out there and play. So, like, I understand the fascination with it, but, like, it really doesn't make that much of a difference for the guys on the field. So I hope it produces a spark. Kevin Stefanski clearly willing to do just about anything to get something going. If this works for him, great.
Right. I want to ask a couple questions around organizational stability. In Ask the Insiders, James1234 said, with Kevin giving up play calling the second time in the last 2 years, is this the final straw for him? Could he be out soon? Well, if the switch of play calling works and the Browns start winning, it looks very good for Kevin Stefanski. If it makes no difference, who knows, right? It is a little bit unusual to see a guy give up play calling twice in 2 years. Do you think that makes him look a little bit less like he's in charge to give that up again, or is it just an indication of how badly the guy wants to win?
Both, honestly. I think it's whatever. This is in the eye of the beholder. If you wanted to make him look weak, it makes him look weak. If you wanted him to look like a guy who's willing to do anything to win, it does that. Look, there's an argument that suggests that, like, the fact that he's willing to give up play calling might suggest he's safer than people want. Some people want him to be. Others assume he will be, because if he's not safe, he might be inclined to say, "I'm going to be the play caller, because if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down fighting." Right. And handing off play calling duties to Tommy Rees might suggest that he feels better about his situation than anyone else. And, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for ownership to dictate to Kevin Stefanski, we're going to make Tommy Rees has to call plays. I don't see that. So look, ultimately, I don't think this changes the situation much for the Browns and Kevin Stefanski's job security. I think whatever it was before the bye week, it basically is what it is. They need to see growth. They need to see improvement over the course of the remaining 9 games. I don't think the play calling element is going to really dictate much in terms of whether the Browns decide to keep Kevin Stefanski for another year or not. But it's certainly an easy talking point for whatever side you want to argue.
All right. Well, one of the guys, out there in the media, I'm not going to, quote, say who it is, because we're not trying to embarrass him or anything. But I read in the paper this morning that he says the last 9 games appear pivotal for Berry and Stefanski to keep their jobs. I wrote this morning that Andrew Berry does not seem to be acting like a guy who's under immediate threat of losing his job with the way that he's doing his job. You would expect that if he was under immediate threat of losing his job because of the 1-loss record, he would be out there trading for maybe known veterans or trading away future assets, just to save his own skin. But that's not what we're seeing at all. We're seeing a guy who very much seems to be looking 1 or 2 years down the road.
Not only that, but look, if they were going to fire Andrew Berry, you'd fire him for the Deshaun Watson fiasco. And they didn't. So clearly they're not holding that against him enough to make that move. And if you're then going to say, well, what has Andrew Berry done for me lately? Well, he crushed the draft and he had a really good offseason. You can sit there and say, well, the record sucks, so he should still go. But all they're going to look at realistically is what he did with the assets he had. They made the great trade down from 2 to 5. They got a first-round pick for next year. They managed to get Mason Graham, who looks pretty good. They've got 2 guys who are in the conversation. Obviously, one of them is going to be out of the conversation for Rookie of the Year in Carson Schwarzenegger, depending on how long he's out. But you coming out of it, up to this point, you could easily make the case that Quinshon Judkins and Carson Schwarzenegger should be the Rookies of the Year for each side of the ball. You got them in the second round. Harold Fandon looks great. And then you get guys like Aiden Huntington, you gave up nothing for, who looks good. Malik Collins, you signed as a free agent for 2 years. He looks like he has a case to be all pro this year. So even the Cornelius Lucas signings and those type of moves were extraordinarily reasonable. Then you solve your corner issue for next year by, Greg Newsome was on the last year of his deal, and you're sitting there going, you're either going to have to make a move with Greg Newsome or find another starting corner. So they go out and make the trade for Tyson Gamble, who has done nothing but play well for the Browns since he's arrived. And he's under contract for next year. So now your corner situation is sorted out, which allows you to do the things everybody wants them to do, what I want them to do, which is focus on the offensive side of the ball. So if you're just sitting there looking at it from ownership standpoint, you're saying, well, Deshaun Watson, I'm not going to fire him for that because 1, I'm complicit. And 2, I'm going to look at what he's done for me lately. And you're going to say Andrew Berry's had the best year of his tenure as GM. He should feel safe. And the Browns would be foolish to get rid of him at this point. You're hoping that they finally sort of, drafting is, there's certainly an element of luck to this, but it does usually take guys some years to sort of figure this out. Howie Roseman, who is arguably the best GM in football, got to a point where they basically put him out of the mix and put him in sort of a desk by himself, like the dude from Office Space, while, Chip Kelly and people were in charge. And he sort of worked his way back and getting in charge. And now he's one of the best in the league. He had a really, really bad run of drafts for a while. Andrew Berry has largely been pretty average and has now gotten better, which is exactly what everybody should want. So I don't expect any reason for the Browns to just decide, well, we're done with this. We're going to get rid of the hot hand, so to speak, when he's done everything you could have possibly wanted, other than sort of, obviously we all wanted him to address the offense and fix that element, but they're in a really good position to do that with, as we've talked, 2 first-round picks, 10 picks overall. You're going to have cash to spend and all those things. You're in the position you want to be to have your offense make a big jump. So Andrew Berry should feel great about his situation right now, even though he should feel awful about the record, as we all do.
Mm. Right. Well, that makes sense. There's certainly people out there who just look at the record and say, well, Andrew Berry's horrible, and he's 6 years in and they're still 2-6, or whatever. I think there's a lot of counter arguments to be made as well, but clearly this last draft was a very, 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 very good draft. All right, so let's hit up some questions in the chat room again, or some comments. Mark Smith 4226 says the problem that the Browns face is there really isn't a left tackle in the draft. You gave the example of M'Boue earlier as a guy who emerged fairly late. Do you think that may be the case again with the crop of left tackles that we have out there right now, or offensive tackles in general?
Yeah, I mean, I don't care if they play left or right. The Browns need tackle help. And if let's say they sign Cam Robinson as a nice insurance policy and they don't get the premium left tackle they might need, but they get like a third rounder who can sort of be his understudy for a year or whatever, but they get a premium right tackle, great. Like, tell me you don't want Penei Sewell on your offensive line. You would love to have that, even though he plays right tackle. I understand why left tackle is very valuable to people, because theoretically protecting your quarterback's blindside in that. But you watch football in the AFC North, and where's TJ Watt? He's always on the right side. So teams are going to move their pass rushers or just line up their pass rushers wherever they feel that it's going to give them the best opportunity to win. And so we'll see. I would say that offensive line in general is really difficult to evaluate in terms of projecting the draft outside of the no doubters, simply because we don't get their athletic testing for a super long time, and opinions vary greatly, and guys move a lot over the course of the draft process as we sit here in November. There's a lot of football to be played. And unfortunately, the other element that plays out is injuries. So, for example, not a left tackle or right tackle, but a center, Connor Lew for Auburn, who was projected to be the top center in the draft, towards ACL. Probably not going to come out in the draft, all that stuff. So there's an element of that. But again, you've got a lot of football left to be played, but whether it's Francis Moisoa or however he pronounces it, it's not like how it looks. If it's some of the other tackles in this draft class, even Ohio State's got another tackle that could be a guard, could be something else. There's a lot of these guys where it's very easy to sort of look at this and go, well, they're disappointing or whatever. And then when the draft comes, they're still 330 pounds and they play a premium position and they get artificially inflated. Now, that may sort of suggest that you should be cautious on when you're drafting these guys. But I say this every year, the fat kids go first in the draft because there are not enough of them. But you're going to see a lot of movement over the course of the draft process the rest of this year. And we'll see if some guys step up and get better and get on a hot streak or whatever. But there's a lot of movement. So I'm not anywhere near in a position to say, there's not a left tackle in the draft or whatever. There's going to be tackles, certainly guards. And I would argue guard is more important than tackle. It's just tackles are more difficult to find.
Right. Another comment from the chat room. This is from Chris. And Chris said, would you guys consider, after other needs are met, getting another running back?
I'm not in any hurry to get another running back. I am absolutely thrilled with Quinshon Judkins. He's actually better than I thought he'd be thus far. He's doing things I didn't see him do in college with his vision and some of the other things. And I'm really excited about what Dylan Sampson can do. And they've got Raheem Sanders still sitting there that they can evaluate at some point if they want to. So I'm not going to argue and say don't get a running back, particularly if there's a great value or an undrafted free agent comes out and you sign them and they can make your team better. But no, I desperately want to fix all the other things on the offense that aren't tight end and running back right now. I want to get the offensive line going to maximize those running backs and make them better. The quarterback position needs to get dealt with once and for all, and
right.
they need more receivers. So I'm not anti-running back, but I'm definitely pro everything else first.
That makes sense. Comment from Big Reg, who I think is defending Shedeur Sanders in this one. He says he was trying to make a big play. We don't want to see checkdowns. Give us the sack before we look at another checkdowns in life. That's his defense of Shedeur Sanders' tendency to take sacks. Just from a philosophical standpoint, Pete, we've got, the Cleveland Browns struggling to stretch the field in any way, shape, or form. It's crippling the running game at this point, or appears to be. Would you be willing to accept more sacks if we were able to make more plays downfield?
Maybe. I mean, I guess it depends on how that really looks. But look, I'm anti-negative plays in general. I want to take the profit as much as possible. And again, you can look up the tape. Sanders wasn't taking sacks because he was looking for a big play. His eyes were in the wrong place. There were wide open guys that could have made plays, could have run with the ball with space, and he didn't make the plays he was supposed to. It was awful. Like, again, I'm telling you, Shedeur Sanders could be a long-term start, could be the answer to the Cleveland Browns problems in 2 years if he makes the steps he can. There's a significant amount of talent there, but he does a lot of dumb stuff that gets him in trouble and got him in trouble at Colorado, which is why he's been the most sacked, like one of the most sacked quarterbacks ever, basically. And if you look from a analytical standpoint, if you look at the trends, the guys who are the most sacked in college, 1, stay getting the most sack in the NFL, and 2, struggle. Taking sacks is not a good trait coming from the college level to the NFL level. And, it's one of the things that, like, I freely admit I had Caleb Williams as the top overall quarterback in that class. He took a heroic amount of sacks in college, and it's really hurting him in the NFL. Lenore Sellers takes a preposterous number of sacks, which scares the crap out of me right now with what he does, getting out of negative plays. Like, let's look at Tom Brady, and obviously he's an anomaly in terms of just how good he was as a processor. He didn't take negative plays. He just didn't. He didn't take many sacks. He got out of things. He lived to play the next down. And Shedeur Sanders, even if he wants to take the big play, okay, but throw it out of bounds when it's not there. Get out of the play. Don't take bad sacks and put yourself in a bad situation, because if it's 1st and 10 and you take a negative play, now it's 2nd and 18, that's a really difficult place to operate. And that's what often happened at Colorado. And there were times they could get away with it and throw it to one of the many athletes who is better than everybody else on the field in terms of speed and all those other things. That doesn't work in the NFL. You don't see that as a productive way to operate. And you're watching the Kansas City Chiefs struggle with that right now. They're taking negative plays with Pat Mahomes, and that's not a knock on Pat Mahomes. He's one of the best to ever do it. But it is literally hurting them right now. So negative plays are bad. Like, this should be the simplest thing I can possibly say on the show. Negative plays are bad. I understand the idea of risk and reward, but taking a sack is not like a risk-reward proposition. Throwing a ball that could potentially be intercepted is a risk-reward proposition. Taking a sack is just negative. And more than likely, it's eventually going to end up in a fumble. As we saw with Joe Flacco, one of the reasons he's not here is he kept putting the ball on the ground.
Right. I didn't watch – I have to admit, I did not watch a lot of Colorado games, but I can read the statistics and the box scores. And I know that Shedeur Sanders took a lot of sacks. His offensive line wasn't very good. But he also had an absurdly high completion percentage, didn't he, Pete? Doesn't that strike you, that combination of taking sacks and a very high completion percentage give you an indication that this guy's like an anti-Joe Flacco or anti-Jameis Winston, who's not throwing into double coverage with, the confidence of Superman, that he is, far more interested in makeable plays?
Well, part of the problem, part of the problem / solution is that Shedeur Sanders generally doesn't throw the ball unless he's sure about it. That's part of the reason he has taken as many sacks as yet. There are a number of situations where he either isn't sure what the coverage is doing and then pulls the ball down, or he starts to throw, sees something that catches him, and he just stops and then ends up taking a sack. Now, that probably prevented the potential of a turnover-worthy play, but it also resulted in taking a sack. So you have to consider those trade-offs. So this is why Shedeur Sanders is a really tantalizing prospect, because if he can, 1, read the field better and get a better process, like he can start seeing things faster. His arm and everything else, he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but he can really throw the ball. If he can figure those things out and then put the arm into action and take advantage of his incredible ability to throw the football, then you're all of a sudden going to be really excited about what Shedeur Sanders is doing. And that's why I thought it was great for the Browns to take him in the 5th round. I love the risk reward of that pick in terms of potential payoff, because if he's out of the league in 2 years, it's not the end of the world. But if he hits, he could hit huge for you. But that's going to take a lot of work. And I think people underestimate that, which is why I'm hoping he's doing the work to get better in those areas, but I don't necessarily think it's going to translate the way we hope. And we saw it in the preseason. It's not easy to fix those things quickly in my mind. So I'm hoping he's doing the work necessary. And if he does, he could be really, really good. And look, this is the other part about this. Let's say the Browns take a quarterback. Let's say they take Ty Simpson or whoever the hell else in the draft next year. But that quarterback is not ready to hit the field as a rookie. One of these guys is going to have the opportunity to step in and be that guy. If Shedeur Sanders really takes a hold of this and grows in a way where he could become that quarterback that we all want him to be, let's make a comparison. I know they weren't drafted at the same time, but they traded Paul Warfield to get Mike Phipps, which, by the way, don't trade Myles Garrett. You got Mike Phipps. Mike Phipps stunk, and then they bumped into 10th round pick Brian Sipe, who would ultimately become the MVP. So if the Browns take a quarterback and then Shedeur Sanders becomes a great quarterback, nobody's going to hate that idea. If the Browns I would love to operate in a world where the Browns have too many good quarterbacks. Give me this problem. Feed me the problem of too many good quarterbacks. So I'm hoping that Shedeur Sanders is doing everything in his power to get better. I hope he doesn't look this as a one-year proposition and immediately goes, well, they're drafting quarterbacks, so I'm done. I hope that just pushes him to work hard and compete and take the job, because that they're very real possibility that could happen if he makes those strides.
Right. Well, good way to end the program, talking about the Browns having too many good quarterbacks. Issue that we have not faced in the post-1999 era, but it's good to think about. Just want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, watching the program. Thank everyone in chat for your questions. They were very helpful in guiding the program, as always. And thank you, Pete, for your insight. Appreciate it, as always. We will be back next week, hopefully with Lane Atkins and an operational internet in tow for Gang of Three. We will see you next Monday, folks. Good night.